Good afternoon. I'd like to call the Finance, Ways and Means Committee to order for February 15th, post-Valentine's Day. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Representatives Campbell, Camper, Crawford, Faison, Freeman, Gant, Garrett, Gillespie, Hawk, Hicks, Lamar, Lambert, Lynn, Miller, Ogles, Sexton, Shaw, Sparks, Todd, Whitson, Williams, Wendell, Zachary, Vice Chairman Baum, Chairlady Hazelwood.
Here.
Madam Chairlady, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Are there any personal orders or announcements before we get underway? I will just note there's several visitors in the audience, some NFIB members I know, and perhaps others as well. So we welcome you to the festivities today. Thank you for joining us. We have one bill on our calendar, and then we will go straight into budget hearings. We have 3 on the schedule for today. And as a matter of information, members, you have an updated budget hearing schedule that's been sent to your offices. We will have budget hearings this Thursday afternoon, but after this week, we will no longer have Thursday afternoon budget hearings. We have rescheduled those. So by popular demands. All right, the first item on our calendar, item number 1, on our calendar is House Bill 1685 by Chairman Williams. Chairman Williams, you're recognized. We have a motion and a second.
Thank you, Chairman and members. This bill just puts the National Soccer Club in the same posture as our other professional sports, allowing for the sale of alcoholic beverages on the premises. Happy to answer any questions the members might have.
Are there questions?
Question on the bill.
Question has been called on the bill. Seeing no objection, we are voting on House Bill 1685. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed?
No.
If you'd like to have your no recorded, then please see the clerk. House Bill 1685 does pass and moves on to calendar and rules. That does complete the calendar. He just didn't want to get business in calendar and rules. He's trying to slow that process. But seriously, that does complete our calendar for today, and we're going to go straight into budget hearings. So without objection, we're out of session, and we will begin our budget hearings today with the Department of Corrections. So if you folks could come forward, Ms. Helton and team. And I'll remind you, those of you who remembered you bring your iPad, which I didn't, but this information is on your dashboard, so you can find it there. I have a paper copy. But Ms. Helton, thank you for being here. And if you would introduce yourself and your team, and then we look forward to hearing what you have to tell us about the proposed budget for the Department of Corrections for FY23.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Lisa Helton. I'm the interim commissioner for the Tennessee Department of Correction. Thank you for giving us this opportunity to talk with you and present our recommended budget. With me today, to my left, is CFO Bo Irvin, and to my right is Brian Hughes, who's the Director of Human Resources for the department, and Lisa Parks, who's the Director of Budget and Fiscal.
Commissioner Helton, could you make sure your mic is on, and if it is, maybe a little bit closer?
Feels like it's on. Is it on? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
All
it
right,
is.
thank you.
I just have a delicate voice.
Just speak to us like you're speaking to your errant children. And
Oh, I don't know. As this slide reflects, we're responsible for nearly 25,000 incarcerated offenders or inmates, with oversight of 62,000 folks who are on probation and community corrections, and about 13,000 parolees. The department's FY23 recommended budget is $1.25 billion. And as you can see, the pie chart sort of gives a quick snapshot of where our budget appropriations are dedicated programmatically. Obviously, the biggest portion of that, 68%, goes to prison operations, with 14% to local jail payments, and 12% to community supervision, which includes probation and parole, day reporting centers, community resource centers, the sex offender treatment program, and community corrections. Our next slide tracks the number of state positions since FY19. Overall, we've averaged 6,384 positions over the last 5 years. You'll note that we had a decrease of 112 positions between FY20 and FY21. We were able to make these reductions by reducing long-term vacancies that wouldn't negatively impact our mission. We do see position increases from FY21 to FY23. Those are primarily attributed to the implementation of the Reentry Success Act. We also abolished some positions, some vacant positions during that time as well. The next slide is a snapshot of the recommended cost increases. And we have talked about our commitment to best practices for several years. Commissioner Parker frequently talked about that. We were intentional in this budget to make recommendations that would request investment in what we know works and what best practice shows that works in order to improve outcomes for those folks under our care and custody. 43% of the recommended cost increases are specifically related to the salary increases for the correctional officer series employees, and we'll hear more about that in just a moment. 35% of the cost increases are specifically related to contractual obligations, so things like medical and behavioral health, pharmacy, food service. And then 22% is specifically related to the Reentry Success Act, correctional education investments, and equipment, all things that go toward either best practices or maintaining safe and secure prisons and providing supervision in the community. Due to time constraints for the presentation, we'll only highlight what we consider to be one of our highest priorities for the cost increases, and that is the correctional officer series salary increases. I'll turn that over to Director Hughes so he can discuss the slide and talk further about those, the salary cost increase.
Good afternoon. I'm Brian Hughes, Director of Human Resources for the Department of Correction, and I'll cover our recommended cost increases for the security series salary increases. The slide that you're looking at currently shows the trend of our correctional officer vacancies since 2018. As you can see, we had a decrease in vacancies following the 2019 increases, but after the COVID pandemic began, we saw a significant increase in our vacancies for correctional officers. In response to that, we implemented several initiatives. Most notably, we implemented a $5,000 hiring bonus and a $1,000 referral bonus. That was not successful in attracting new candidates to our ranks, so the governor effected a salary increase for correctional officers on December 16th. That was funded with a combination of internal equity, payroll savings, and market salary funds. In response to that, that action increased correctional officer starting pay from $32,500 to $44,500, which is around a 37% increase. And that moved TDOC correctional officers to parity with other state law enforcement agencies and made us the top paid state Department of Corrections in the Southeast United States. The impact of that salary increase, which you can see on this slide, has been significant. Since the pay increases went into effect, we have hired approximately 274 new officers. That's a total that equals what we had been able to hire in the preceding 6 months before the pay increases. And our vacancies have declined by approximately 17% since then. So we are hopeful that these trends will continue. And I will turn it back over to the Commissioner for closing remarks.
In closing, I'd just like to take this opportunity to publicly acknowledge the staff of the department, both in the community and in the prisons. They have an extraordinarily difficult and complex, challenging job. Often thankless, their friends and families are impacted by the sacrifices they make to keep this mission going forward and to help us meet our mission. And so I just want to acknowledge them publicly. I tell them when I see them, but I think it's nice to let them know in all public forums that we appreciate that. I also appreciate your support over time. I've seen it over time in a different role and continue to see it. And so I believe that we're on the right track with best practices, with our enhanced reentry, enhanced education with enterprise partners, and appreciate your support in moving forward. And with that, subject to your questions, Madam Chair, or those of the committee, that concludes the presentation.
Thank you, Commissioner. There's a lot going on in corrections, I know, and we appreciate you prioritizing the things most important to you. And I'm sure we'll have questions perhaps from committee members about other things, but I want to take this opportunity to publicly thank you and all the people in the Department of Corrections. I did not visit a prison, but heard a lot about what was going on with just the labor shortages through the pandemic, with not having enough people, whether it was because of illness or quarantine or just people leaving the position for other jobs. And for those who persevered through that, we are extremely grateful for keeping Tennesseans safe from those who are incarcerated and keeping those that we had incarcerated safe as well. So I know it was a tough Herculean task. And so thank you, and please pass along the appreciation of this committee and I think the whole General Assembly for the amazing job that you did under very, very difficult circumstances. So with that, first on my list is Representative Garrett with question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate that. Thank you all for everything you do. I have visited a prison once and here, and they put a stamp on my hand, and I subsequently had to wash my hands, and I was a little bit worried that stamp wouldn't get me out. So I tend to not visit them in my fear of not being able to get back out. So I don't ever want to do that again. But nonetheless, thank you all. You have a very tough job, and we appreciate all that you do. My question centers around salary increases for our correctional officers. $28.4 million has been of recurring dollars has been provided for salary increases for our correctional officers. And my question centers around that. So are there positions within the correctional system also slated for salary adjustments? If not, then why wouldn't there be? So that's what my question is.
At the moment, the crisis, the immediate need, of course, was for the correctional security series. And so we are always, of course, open to opportunities to increasing salaries, but we don't have a specific salary increase on the table at the moment. We have, however, implemented several initiatives to provide some monetary support to those folks who have gone into the prison or who work in the prison, but not in a security post typically, and are working in a security post now. So with a bonus or so there's a bonus system, and then there is also a system where if you're working that post, and you don't make that salary, you can make that salary. But at the moment, we don't have a specific plan for increasing other salary grades or salary series.
Good deal. Thank you very much for that answer. I appreciate it.
Just to tag on to that a bit, what about the compression issue? When you raise the incoming wages for your new hires, how are you addressing keeping some distance between those folks and the folks who have, who worked through the pandemic, who were or have been there for a number of years?
Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am, very carefully, but I will let Brian Hughes respond to that.
Thank you for the question. I appreciate that. And that was definitely a concern of ours as well. We knew from the data, the issue that we were having was that we weren't able to attract sufficient candidates. So we wanted to make sure that we could increase the starting salary to a point that would be very attractive to new hires, while also recognizing that we did have the group, as you mentioned, that really pulled us through the pandemic. The way we structured those salary increases is we funded such to bring everyone to either the new minimum salary or to give those individuals a 15% salary increase, whichever was higher. So while that didn't necessarily perfectly address the issue of compression, we tried to, as much as we could with what we had available, address the concern of the starting salary while also making sure that all of the current employees received a very good pay increase.
All right, and so that was, I guess, part of the stopgap measure, if you will, because of the tremendous amount of attrition and the number of vacancies. Is there anything in this year's budget that additionally addresses that compression issue? Because what I think I'm hearing you say that you could have somebody who'd been there for some period of time, maybe hopefully less than a year or whatever, but some period of time longer than a new hire who would be making the same amount. So, turn your mic on, please.
Sorry, yes, ma'am, you would see that. Unfortunately, again, that was just kind of the trade-off that we had to look at when we were trying to address both issues. The request in the governor's budget is to continue the salary increases that were implemented at the time that we did. There are no changes to that in the requested budget.
And do you have any retention data on, it's great that we're bringing new people in, but if we're losing them at the end of the pipeline and it's a continual process, then we really haven't accomplished much. So do you have any data on how that's been received, I guess, by your employees who've been around a while?
Just looking at the retention data, and of course, we have a pretty limited period of time to look at it.
Right.
The numbers that we're seeing right now, at least system-wide, and of course, the picture's going to differ somewhat from facility to facility, but right now, it looks like the turnover is coming in at about half what it was before we implemented the pay increase. Of course, we have seen the issue of individuals quitting their job for other employment all across the country. We have definitely not been immune to that. But since that increase was implemented, we have decreased that turnover pretty significantly. As far as the individuals that we've hired, of course, when you try to hire a lot of people at one time, the chances are you might get some that they see the dollars without necessarily considering what they're going to do. But of the individuals that we've hired, just in that limited period of time, only 15 of those have separated. So, and of course, we do understand that there's more to this issue than just compensation. So we are working with partners across state government, with the governor's office as well, to make sure that we're really addressing this holistically and not just from that point of view, to make sure that that what you mentioned is something that we're very conscious of.
Thank you. Chairman Todd.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Have a few questions for you. I see that you've got about $14.8 million recurring for an increase in correctional salaries at privately operated prisons. Has the state ever provided a correctional salary increase for privately operated prisons in this way?
But I wouldn't necessarily be aware of that. I would defer, I guess, to Mr. Irvin or Ms. Parks on that.
No, we have not to this extent.
If you would identify yourself for the record.
I'm
Thank you.
sorry, Lisa Parks, Director of Budget and Fiscal Services. No, we have not had a salary increase for the private prisons to this extent before. I've been with the department for 28 years.
Okay. So do they just do it on their own within their contract, or how's that handled in the past?
Right now, when the contracts come up for rebid, then they would increase the per diem. That would include any salary increases for their employees.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. Are correctional salaries included in the contract liability for privately operated prisons?
Yes, they are.
Okay. And will this increase in the salaries require an amendment to that contract? Is this kind of hitting it in the middle of a contract?
Yes, all the contracts are currently being amended.
Okay. My last question, what's the current vacancy rate at the privately operated prisons for officers?
We don't have the visibility on that, but we'll try to get that information, get it back to you.
Okay, thank you so much.
If you could get that information, because as I think the Chairman Todd's questions have highlighted, this is a bit of an unusual ask or an unusual inclusion in the budget. So I think having some background about why it might be necessary and where we are in the contract phase and that sort of thing would be helpful. If you get that to me, then we'll distribute it to the committee members.
We'll do that. Thank you.
Chairman Hawk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner and your team, thank you so much. Right over here. Thank you. I want to talk a little bit about the Reentry Success Act of 2021. It was mentioned just a little bit earlier, but I have two questions here. If we could go a little more in depth on the status of the Reentry Success Act, as well as if we could talk about the positions that we're requesting for that. When we passed the bill 2021, we were looking at 39 new positions, adding 30 positions this year, then 20 positions next year. I see where we are requesting 41 positions in this current budget document. Can we talk about how many folks were hired on the initial bill, why we're needing 41 positions now, and what the future of the employees in this in the Reentry Success program will be as well?
Yes, sir. The positions are tied primarily to supervision in the community, the piece of the legislation that has to do with mandatory supervision and also all that goes into supervision. So the 41 positions, I think 26 of those are probation parole officers, 4 are managers, and 11 are social workers. Part of what we provide in the community is sort of wraparound services for those folks, many of whom have substance use and mental health issues, as well as just adjustment issues. And so we have been able to provide social workers across the state in all of our probation parole districts to support the needs of those offenders when they are on probation and parole. So that's what those positions are about. Mandatory supervision will, of course, increase the number of offenders that we have, with revocation caps as well, which was a part of the legislation last year. Probationers and parolees are spending less time on a revocation on a first, second, and third revocation. And so they're coming back out and often will have a more intensive case management plan. So the social worker or the officer, depending on the supervision level, will play into that as well. In addition, we are providing some support to jails who are establishing programs. And so there's some oversight and review of those proposals for jails that are going to provide evidence-based programming for folks who are in their facilities. So that's sort of the broad overview of what that work looks like for those officers. And so the ones last year have already begun the work because of the way the legislation is structured for some of the folks coming out who have expired their sentence. They'll have a different approach to supervision. And so those folks have begun that work already, preparing for those caseloads.
Chairman Hawk.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And to that point, were we successful in hiring all the people we needed in year one in the current budget that we're in? Did we successfully bring all 39 personnel into that, and we're adding 41, or clarify that for me, and forgive me for I may be a blunt instrument today and not listening very well. Thank you.
Positions were filled. I know that some of them were just because they were probation parole officers, so I was aware of that, but I'll defer to him on all the positions last year.
I don't have the specifics of it in front of me, but yes, most, if not all of those positions were filled. They were filled with internal employees because they were promotional opportunities for current staff. So yes, those were filled. Of course, that did create some backfill positions that we would have to fill as well. So, which is just something that's an ongoing process for us.
Representative Campbell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I represent the district that includes Northeast Correctional Complex, and I want to compliment each of you in the department. And Assistant Commissioner Dotson, thank you for being in my home county to discuss compensation, safety, and other concerns of correctional officers. Thank you for the salary increases that are being worked out. I know that has helped with recruitment and retention of correctional officers. I know it's not only a problem in Northeast, it's a problem statewide, and I would venture to say nationally. One topic area I'm still curious about is what is being done to prevent weapons in our state prisons, whether they're coming in or being created on site or a piece of wood or whatever the situations are. Is it a staff shortage? Is it a policy thing? Is it a leadership thing? There was a stabbing at Northeast Thursday, and my local paper contacted me today and told me there was another one. I asked for a weapons check over the weekend. I don't know if that's been conducted or not. Is there a CERT team in place? How frequently do you check a prison for weapons?
Thank you for that question. I would just say that is a challenge for any prison environment, any jail environment, any environment where folks are incarcerated. You are always going to face that. The search was conducted over the weekend or since then. So I would say we have a number of efforts. We do have teams. We do regular searches. We do random searches. We do surprise searches. We do sort of very targeted searches and broader searches. We have a number of efforts toward monitoring contraband, monitoring material that can be crafted into a weapon. So I would say, yes, we're very active in that. Wardens are very actively involved in that. AC Dotson's very actively involved in that. It unfortunately is a product of the prison life. But as for the specifics, if you'd like to have more specific information, I'll be glad for AC Dotson to come up and provide more specific information about that work.
Thank you. I don't think that'll be necessary in today's environment, but please see that those checks are as aggressive as possible for the safety of my staff, including the correctional officer that was stabbed last week, and also for the inmates involved. I want to pivot to another topic area. In this budget, there's talk about positions for special agents. What will that title do within the Department of Corrections? It's $430,400 for 5 full-time special agents.
I believe that those are, they're a mix among the agents in OIC. Between AEU is responsible, that unit is responsible for locating absconders and arresting absconders. Do you have it? Okay. One of them, so that's 2, would be the AEU is the Apprehension and Enforcement Unit, and they work in the field, they work out in the community. One of the agencies, or one of the positions is for an investigations unit, that would be in West Tennessee. And then 2 of them are for the STG, the Security Threat Group unit, and they obviously work with investigating gang activity related to prison gangs, street gangs, other gangs, which also often plays into the weapon situation. The investigations unit in the West Tennessee area, of course, as you would expect, they conduct investigations. And so those 5 positions would have those functions in different units of the Office of Investigations and Conduct.
Thank you. And just lastly, I want to recap and just quickly say thank you. Thank you for trying to get more staff on board in these various prisons that need those numbers increased because of available positions not being filled and turnover and all those other things involved. I know there have been a lot of factors and a lot to work through, but just know that that remains a priority for me. And if there's any way I can help you, please ask. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Next on my list is Chairman Williams.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Just had a couple quick questions. I know that I saw medication treatment again in the budget, something we do every year. I noticed we didn't say what kind of treatment that was. Is it buprenorphine or is it Vivitrol, or have we determined what that is yet?
It's not Vivitrol, but I'm not sure. I can't
Okay.
answer that. I can get that for you.
Okay, thank you. I have
Mhm.
another question. I noticed in the budget document, you have electronic security specialists, and it says that that you created some new positions there with recurring dollars. Is that correct? And it doesn't tell us how many positions that's going to be? Do you know how many positions that's going to be that you're adding for the electronic system?
That's three. That'd be three positions, sir, and we haven't added any.
If-
Oh, I'm sorry, Bo Irvin, Chief Financial Officer. We've added three positions there. We'll reclassify some others to make these positions. And we haven't added any in 15 years.
Okay.
And as you know, the electronic age has vastly improved since then, so the need is great.
Yeah, I did notice there was 250, I think it was $259,000 for those three positions, but you also had some vacant positions. Are you expecting to expand more than the three, or is it by recategorizing or reutilizing any positions, or is
Well-
it just three for that?
What we did on those was we had three vacant food service positions that were state positions.
Uh-huh.
So by moving those positions, anytime we abolish or vacate a position like that, reclassify, that funding goes over into the food services contract, for example. So we need the state dollars to replace that for these positions, although we have the vacancies that we can reclassify.
Thank you.
A follow-up on the medical question. Can any of you speak to the Hep C issue in the prisons and treatment costs and where we are with that whole issue?
Yes, ma'am. Currently, that's, we're paying about $17,000 a patient for that. We got a lot of, that money, as you're well aware of, a couple of years ago, that's been spent. The problem is ongoing. We have great efforts that we make each and every day to treat patients. We have a very high success rate with the treatment protocol that we're using now, but the need is still there, whether it's inmates coming into the system, new intakes, or in some cases, returning inmates who we've cured, gone back out and come back in. So it's an ongoing issue, and that's why the need for the additional dollars.
And I guess, the whole recidivism issue is a huge cost for the state, and that's just another way that we incur cost people who come back probably didn't get any healthier if they're coming back into prison. So during their time out. So that really is I sometimes feel that we're like a gerbil on a wheel going round and round with that issue and not really, you make progress with this group, but then you get another group so the issue is still there. And $17,000 per patient, can you?
17,000.
17,000,
Yes, ma'am.
yes. Can you relate that to past years? Because I was thinking the number was not quite that much. Or maybe, and I know nothing's gotten cheaper, so.
Dr. Williams, our Chief Medical Officer, is here. If we would,
That you can just get it.
Okay.
Just a curiosity, if we could just sort of have a graph of the Hep C cost, both individually and collectively, to the department.
Yes, ma'am.
I'd be interested in seeing that.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Next on the list, Representative Ogles.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Commissioner, for being here today and your team. We appreciate the great job y'all do. We know it's a taxing job, to say the least, sometimes. This is kind of a fun question. I won't ask you what these are used for, but last year we appropriated $703,000 for body scanners. And this year there's an additional $1.9 million for body scanners. Can you tell us how many were bought last year and then how many will be bought this year? And ultimately what the end goal is with the purchasing the body scanners at the facilities?
Yes, sir. I'm sorry.
The ones from last year have been purchased. They're in place. Those were for Checkpoint for all of the TDOC institutions. Some of those institutions require some sort of structural change in order to install those, and that's taking place now. The ones in this budget request are for intake for offenders. And so Checkpoint would be for visitors. Intake would be for the inmates and staff who would be coming through intake.
Representative Ogles.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So for clarification, so both the inmates, the visitors, and the staff were trying to get scanned to maybe alleviate some of the weapons issues and some of the questions. We're trying to scan everybody is my understanding.
Exactly. And if you go now to say Riverbend, then you would go through a scanner as well as some other security measures before you could go in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chairman Whitson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This has to do with electronic health records. My question, last year, $13 million was appropriated from the department to the department to establish electronic health record system. This fall, the Financial Stimulus Accounting Group, though, approved the allocation of $13 million in American Rescue Plans to be used instead of this appropriation from last year. Can you provide an update on the establishment of this system and where we are today?
We are currently working on the RFP to procure that system, sir. And what the nice thing about getting the FSAG money was it will allow us, once expenditures start hitting, is to utilize the federal dollars instead of these state appropriations, once that starts hitting.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
And what's the timeline on the completion of the procurement to the implementation process?
2 months. 2 months. Our Inspector General here is, he can answer that question, if you don't mind. He
that-
handles all the procurements.
Certainly. If you could just, we've appropriated the money, but what's the spend down and how long until we actually see the implemented product?
Yes, so Kelly Young, Inspector General for the Department of Correction. We are currently as I was stated, in the process of the RFP development. STS is working on contracting with the required third-party consultant that will review the RFP, so experts in the field to review the RFP to make sure that we're hitting all the things that we need from an industry standard as well as a correction standard. We will have that contract in place for that consultant slated by the end of middle to end of March, at which point they'll take time to review the RFP, provide insight. So we hope to have the RFP on the streets by the end of spring, mid to late April. Something this tech heavy, there's going to be a lot of questions. So we expect somewhat of a lengthy time on the street. The hope is to have the contract in place by the end of the year. Obviously, things can happen that might extend that time frame, but that is just the general hope, is to have it in place end of the year with a onboarding process to convert all the records over. That will take several months.
And once these records are all converted, I guess, who has the access to the records? How will they be shared? And can you just speak to that a bit?
Sure. So that'll be, and that's part of what this consultant is going to help us with too, is the access questions, asking the right questions of how access is granted and who can have access. It'll obviously be, because of HIPAA and various other requirements, it'll be as needed access. So Dr. Williams will have kind of the key decision-making on who within the department is going to have regular access to these records. Our contract partners for behavioral health and medical. So right now that's Centurion. They would have access as needed for their staff. They'll work in coordination with Dr. Williams for that. And then also, to a certain extent, there will be some outside entities, local hospitals, and folks of that nature, as well as Core Civic, who operate the privately managed facilities, will have access as well as needed to facilitate care.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Next on the list, Chairman Hicks.
Thank you, Chair Lady. Commissioner, good to see you and your staff here. Just a quick question. Mine is focusing on budget reductions. After the elimination of the Sentencing Act of 1985, 72.4 million in recurring funding was reduced from the department's budget. What is the long-term impact of that?
I just had a conversation about that this morning, but I will leave it to Bo to further discuss that.
What that has done is it has taken our money the way that we've used for capital projects, capital improvements. Our prisons are not getting any younger and the like, and also the ability as we look forward in the future, if we have to build any more prisons, that funding, and now as a result of that bill, goes strictly to operating costs such as clothing, medical treatment, and things like that. So we will have to compete every year for the capital project funding we need each year and ask for improvements going forward.
So in light of that, I mean, is that the only alternative would be to, I mean, to try to, I guess, as you said, battle everyone else with the capital projects? Is there any long-term strategy from the department, or, I mean, is there something else that can be done, or is it, I mean, really come down to that you're just vying for the same funds, capital project list?
It pretty much so. I mean, we'll have to carefully watch as bills are passed and they impact, the population that any increases in the population, because to build a prison, you have to look, 4 to 5 years out and be ready, when that time, and a prison nowadays is going to be very, very costly.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Chair Lady.
Chairman Wendell.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, Commissioner, I want to publicly thank and commend Tory Grimes for his professionalism and work ethic. I think I can speak for everybody on this committee that he works hard for your department. He's a great reflection on your department, and he absolutely takes care of a heavy load for you. And I know you appreciate him, but I want to make sure he knows he's appreciative of the people that, anyway. When we leave here this week, all of us are going to head back home. And at some point, some of us are going to go to cook supper out. If we don't cook, at least one night. And I'm going to end up not at the Cherokee Country Club, but I'm going to end up at a restaurant somewhere in Oak Ridge, Harriman, or Wartburg, Crossville. And I'm going to sit down to eat, just like many of you will. And somebody's going to walk up to me in that restaurant. It never fails to happen. I'm going to be at a high school basketball game. Somebody's going to walk up to me, and they're going to be one of your employees. And he or she is going to say, "Hey, John Mark, have you got a second?" Of course, the answer is yes. And they're going to ask me this question. They're going to say, "I work in maintenance for the state of Tennessee, and I certainly appreciate my sisters and brothers receiving a pay raise. They're in the security classifications. They deserve it, and I'm glad that they got it. But John Mark, you vote on the budget, and you're in the legislature. Why is it that my family has not got the benefit of a pay raise when I go into the prison each day? I work hard. I do as I'm supposed to do. And I'm also in a dangerous environment because I'm in the prison with prisoners also. John Mark, why can't the budget reflect a pay raise for the preferred service employees that are either non-security or other classifications in addition to the security classifications?" And that's the question I'm going to be asking. I'm not trying to trick you or be ugly, but I'm sure you hear the same question. And I know people on this committee have heard the same question. And I'm not trying to be a trickster, and I'm not trying to be ugly, but what do I tell that woman when she walks up and says, "John Mark, I work hard too, and I'm in the prison with some bad people." Everybody's not bad in prison, but some of them probably are. So why can't I receive a pay raise?
Thank you for the question. And you're right, it is something that I've been asked, and not only have I been asked, but it's something that we have a lot of conversation about. I think about that too. I'm aware of those other folks who are in the prisons, either doing their regular job or covering those posts as well. And it really comes down to managing the system that we have, in state government, in the agency, looking at the sort of crisis we had with being able to cover critical post in the prison, having to draw on other folks, and trying to find some balance in addressing the vacancy rate with the correctional officer series, but also trying to be strategic and look for opportunities to say to all of these other people, "We see you. We see that you're working. We see that you're making that sacrifice too." And that is why we worked with DOHR and with some other partners to try to have these other strategies where we couldn't say, there's an across-the-board increase, or we couldn't manage that, but to put other strategies in place. So the bonuses, the premium overtime, the CO, the raise if you're working a post and you don't make a CO salary. We try to put those things in place to recognize that work and that effort. So I hear you and I understand that.
Could you tell me what the total amount for hepatitis C treatment is going to be this year? The budget was unclear to me. I think I saw 4.9 million. Is that just for this 12 months, and I've seen 25 million last year? What's the total cost does it take to treat hepatitis C?
Well, I think as CFO Irvin mentioned earlier, it's about 17,000 per inmate
Right,
for treatment.
the gross number.
We have about 6.6 million currently in our budget for that, and we're asking for another 4.9.
And this is my last question, and I'm not trying to be ugly, but if people are going to shoot up and have unprotected sex in prison, we've got an obligation to take care of those people from a medical perspective. I certainly appreciate that. But we both know that we treat the same people for hepatitis more than once. Is that a fair assessment? It's not unusual, is it?
It can happen, yes, sir.
So I guess not my question is, if I'm trying to make a point is, we're going to treat people who shoot up drugs and have sex in prison to the tune of $6 million. And we have an obligation, a moral obligation, to take care of people who are sick. I certainly appreciate that. But we also have a moral obligation to take care of that maintenance worker who hadn't had a raise. So I would encourage you to take a look at how we spend the money and how fast we take care of some of our medical needs, and maybe budget a raise for some of the preferred service employees who have a difficult job, as opposed to treating hepatitis C cases over and over again. Now, I'm not trying to be ugly. You have to treat people that are sick. But if people are going to pop drugs and have unprotected sex in prison, I think the priority should be for the maintenance workers over that type of conduct. And I'll be quiet with that.
Chairman Williams.
Thank you. I meant to ask earlier and I completely forgot. Do we keep census data per prison? And I've heard numbers say, well, we're at 92% occupancy, or do we keep more granulated data than that, or
Yes, sir. we
year
do.
over year?
Yes, sir.
Okay, could someone in your office send the chair lady that data? I'd like to know what the per population census data is over the last 10 years per prison, excluding your, obviously that would exclude the ones, but also the information regarding those that are in custody in our county jails and local jails.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you.
Leader Camper.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your presentation. If you look on page 4 of your presentation, you have a lot of recommended cost increases, but there's no dollar amount associated with them. And if you look back at last year's budget of about 1.1 billion, current budget about 1.2, the proposed one is about 1.3. And so could you talk about this almost $100 million in cost increase that you're asking for in this budget? Can you explain just a little more clarity about where that money is going to go? I know we've heard people ask questions about the correctional officers and even the Hep C, but this is a lot of unanswered questions on this diagram about how much money we're spending on all of these different cost increases that you asked for. Could you give us a little more detail on that?
Yes, ma'am. Of course. Did you want to go
Okay,
ahead? A number of these are contract inflators, which we have to do per the contracts. 20 million or so of that, a good portion of that. Then we have already spoken to the 28 million for the recurring and 14 million for the private cost increases. We talked about the 4.5 million for the Reentry Success Act and those additional positions. We have a $10 million that the governor's recommended for the correctional education investment, which will help us provide better education, more technologically sound and advanced in our institutions and in our community supervision areas. We have about $7 million. We've touched on a couple of those that are treatment related, 4.9 million for the hepatitis C, with additional $1 million, almost $1.1 million for the indigent fund. I think we talked about that for sex offender treatment for evaluations and group therapy rate increases for those, because it's very hard to get treatment providers to stay with us at the rates we pay. And also the indigent who cannot afford those group therapy sessions, as well as cannot afford to pay for the psychological examinations that are required for sex offenders. So we're doing a rate increase there. We have, we talked about the special agents, 500,000 there. Body scanners, $2 million, additional 10 body scanners, $2.3 million for the radios replacements at one of our institutions because they're outdated. We've got some, one of the things we're really excited about is technology replacement for our community supervision staff. That's about $540,000. When the community supervision was transferred over to the Department of Correction back in 2013, none of the recurring funding for computers, fingerprint machines, and video conferencing equipment was included. So we've been doing the best we could with that, but this will get us on a 4-year replacement cycle to keep our officers with new computers rather than in a break-fix mode like we are now. Another $106,000 we're asking for external, the automated external defibrillators for our community supervision offices right now. We're just depending on if there's a medical emergency, the officers have to and staff have to try to keep them alive by CPR. These will allow life-saving opportunities there. I think I've hit on majority of them.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I think it's good for those that are not here in the streaming to get a deeper understanding of where our tax dollars are going with these increase in costs. So I thank you for spelling those out for us. You talked about in that the Reentry Success Act of 2021. How much did you say about?
4.5 million.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that program and what you're doing with that?
The Reentry Success Act last year provided for a number of changes for folks who are reentering on probation and parole. So, for instance, mandatory supervision requiring that inmates serve at least a year on what would essentially be parole supervision. And the reason behind that, and primarily because it offers them an easy way to access resources. It also provided for revocation caps for technical violations of supervision that did not include a new criminal offense. And it limited the amount of time a person could be incarcerated for a first, second, and third revocation for technical violation only. And so that, of course, increases supervision, increase some work related to that, just making sure the Board of Parole and the courts know where the person is, tracking that. In addition, it provided, so this provides positions to support all of that, the Reentry Success Act, moving forward.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And while we're getting a little more granular in some of these expenses, there's 2.3 million in your budget for radios. Is that for radios within the prison, for the prison guards, or is that replacement or additions?
It is for the prison operations, and part of that is for Bledsoe, and then replacement for some technology that's outdated, and then also for some other prisons replacements.
Okay, so it's replacements and additions for new guards or whatever. Okay, thank you. Representative Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. I don't have any budget question. All the questions pretty much been asked of you guys, but thank you for what you do. Think you do the best that you can do under the circumstances. But when you started your presentation, I was reading and looking at responsible for nearly 25,000 incarcerated offenders, 13,000 parolees, 62,000 offenders. And, I'm thinking, the state of Tennessee, we're a pretty crime-infested state, aren't we? Based on these numbers. Well, that's a little exaggeration. I'm not comparing with other states, but then your budget is over $1 billion. That's, again, a lot of money. And I was looking at the 25,000. We're not responsible for that 25,000. You're not responsible. We're not responsible for those 25,000 incarcerated individuals. But if we were able to reduce that hypothetically, let's say by 5,000, or the 13,000, if we could reduce that by 2,000 or 3,000, and you may not have the answers for this now, but if you could come back, I would like to have a number, 5,000 individuals, and I'm sure those crimes go from the distribution of illegal drugs to first-degree murder. I don't know. But if we could reduce the lesser crimes by 5,000, what would that number look like? What if we could reduce the 13,000 by 2? What would those numbers look like? And then when we started with the Department of Corrections, and when you mentioned you've been here 28 years, back in the day we did have Department of Corrections and oversights. If you could go back and research and find out, once we had that oversight committee, were our numbers higher or lower or the same? Is that some information you could find out?
Yes, sir. Are you saying budget numbers or incarcerated numbers?
Both. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Sparks.
Thank you, Commissioner. Former Commissioner Tony Parker really bragged on you, as well as Tori Grimes back there has always talked highly of you. As far as vetting these new COs that's coming in, I think back just last week or two, we had 3 inmates at our local jail at 940 die overdose, and I believe they got the contraband through another inmate, is what I had read. But what do y'all do to vet these new COs, and how do you also what's the penalty if a correctional officer is found with smuggling in drugs or weapons? What is the charge to that correctional officer?
Well, I will defer to Brian on sort of the interview and vetting process, but anyone who is found to be bringing contraband into the facility is charged criminally. We prosecute those, whether they're visitors or we ask the DA to prosecute, whether they're visitors or staff members.
Yeah.
And sir, to your question about the selection process, once the candidate completes an application and is selected for interview, they do interview in front of a panel of current security employees. From there, finalists are referred to the leadership team of the facility, which would be the warden and the associate wardens, who have to conduct second-round interviews with those individuals. Those who are given a conditional offer of employment have to complete a pre-employment drug screen, a pre-employment physical examination, a pre-employment psychological examination, and a criminal background check before being fully hired by the department.
Do you all call maybe peers in the neighborhood where they grew up, or how do y'all do those kind of checks and balances, say other law enforcement agencies may do?
We don't do probably those specific items that you mentioned. We do certainly do a deeper check into any former law enforcement or correctional employers to determine what type of employee that person was when they worked for that particular agency.
Yes. Well, if I could, Chairman.
Chairman Sparks, we're running out of time, and we have
Okay.
Representative Sparks, if you could just.
Just real quick, yeah. I
Finish
guess
up.
since Phase On and maybe William, some of us been up here, I bet the prison budget's probably increased $350 million, maybe $400 million. And Tori, you could correct me, I'm wrong on those numbers, but somebody mentioned the word crisis. I forgot who it was, but it's a crisis, folks. This drug problem, the cost is totally unsustainable to keep spending this kind of money. My local jails are going to start losing correctional officers to keep up with y'all, which is not, I'm not complaining, but where are they going to find these local correctional officers? So I think we're facing it is a crisis when you start using that word crisis. So thank you for the good work y'all do. Thank you, Chairman.
Chairman Todd.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have one follow-up question about community corrections, and I understand that you've got a RFP out right now, and there's probably some things you can't say, so I'm going to talk higher level than that. Last year, I know we had some assurances given by the administration that they were going to leave community corrections alone, do some research, gather some data, and then pull all the stakeholders back in before any changes were made. But I'm getting an understanding that this RFP kind of changes some things that are significant. Can you address that from the standpoint of them being able to continue that program as it has been? And how significant or how different these changes are making the program, and whether it's going to be really functional like it has been or not.
I will try to address that. As you say, the RFGP is out on the streets, and so we're limited in what we can say about it. What I will say is that the legislation last year included evaluation, and so we did change the reporting function and the template for those agencies that are currently under contract in order to get that data in, including reconciling the definition of recidivism, which was in error at the time. And so that allows us to look at that in terms of that evaluation. On the RFGP, it allows for any proposer to propose a supervision component along with a treatment component, or to propose a standalone treatment component without supervision. And so it gives folks an opportunity to maximize their local community partnerships to craft a treatment model, whether that's, sort of an intensive outpatient, a day reporting center. We have two current contracts that do residential. So it allows a proposer to look at treatment options and propose that. And if they want to include a supervision component, they can do that as well. The standards are risk-based standards within the RFGP, the standards of supervision.
Chairman Todd.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So would you say that someone that would finish this RFGP for, I guess, using the same model that they did last year would be at a disadvantage of someone that took this opportunity to propose some of these options that you have mentioned? Are they going to be the ones that are proposing these new options? Are they going to be more highly considered? How would you evaluate that?
I think that's tough to answer. I would just say that, all of the proposals will be evaluated in line with, CPO regulations and rules, and those that are responsive to the RFGP, those folks who respond will be evaluated, everyone on the same basis would be my guess. But I think that's probably as far as I could go with that.
Well, thank you for that. I do have a concern that we're kind of changing some direction here with this RFGP without having the couple of years of data that was asked for and was talked about. I think they've been in this about 6 months, I believe, of data gathering and reporting. And so it seems premature to be changing that system in what appears to be a significant way. Now, hopefully it will not be, and then we can really have the data to appropriately modify the program if we need to in the future. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Leader Lamberth.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And may I go back and forth just a little bit with questions? Thank you, Madam Chairman. So last year, if you can, what was your reversion back to the state budget?
We reverted 300 million back to the budget, general fund.
So roughly a third of your budget was reverted back. Can you
Yes,
tell
sir.
me what that was attributed to?
Yes, sir. We had a one-time windfall from the COVID money that allowed us to recoup 10 months of our salaries for all of our correctional staff, and some additional staff that are in the front lines. And that was 200 million of that right there. So then the remaining 100 million was obviously our population was down due to COVID. So we saw some operational savings there. Payroll savings, as we've talked about, we had vacancies made up the remaining 100 million.
And the year before that, so obviously that's an extraordinary year. What about kind of the year or two before that? I mean, your reversions, I think, have outpaced kind of the projections each year. What's kind of an average reversion year?
Director Parks.
Lisa Parks, Director of Budget and Fiscal Services. So in 20, it was 57.4 million. That's due again to the vacant positions, low population. And fiscal year 19, it was at 24.9 million.
So fair to say, in the tens of millions, virtually every year, you all are able to revert back. Let me ask another question here. I mean, roughly half of our population that's being incarcerated is either in a private facility or a local jail on a backup or some other type of condition. Is that roughly accurate?
I know we have about 7,600 beds on the private side. We are at an operating capacity of, I think, about 13,000 state beds, and then the local and jail backups.
So again, out of roughly 25,000, a little bit of change, it's prisoners. I mean, about half are somewhere besides a TDOC prison.
Yes,
Fair
sir.
enough?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And the reserve balances that you have, both probation and parole, any reserve balances out there, what kind of is a basic kind of combination of all those reserve balances? Do you know how large that's gotten to be?
For probation and parole
A
versus
probation and parole,
institution.
sure, probation, parole, or any of the reserve balances that are out there.
Director Parks, you got that handy?
Well, the largest one was the Sentencing Act, and that's gone. So I'm sorry, let me pull it here.
That would have been the $83 million, correct?
Yes, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
And I want to correct my numbers on the prisons. It was about 16,000 is our operating capacity there versus 77.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have a reserve of the supervision fees. It's $5.6 million. Then we have, we had the data processing, which that was for our comment project. It was only at 3.4 million. Major maintenance, that's what we use to do anything under $10,000 within the prison maintenance work. It's at $1.6 million. The sex offender registry fees at $3.3 million. Global positioning system, that's just over $500,000 or 500 million. 500,000, I'm sorry. half
No,
a
no,
million.
500,000. I knew what you meant there.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Extra
And-
zero. So, and then we pay approximately $160 million plus to local jails to house state inmates. Is that roughly accurate as well? And in 2021, there was a big drop in that. Was that the court backup? Is that kind of what contributed to a major drop in local jail prisoners that were actually TDOC prisoners?
The courts basically shut down.
Yeah. So, but on average, I mean, I think that 150 to 160 million dollars what we pay for locally housed prisoners that are convicted felons that are TDOC prisoners, year to year, that's about what we're looking at, right?
Yeah, depending upon the population.
So here's kind of where I'm going on this. You talked a little bit about community corrections, probation, parole, and everything else, and we've talked about the amount of money that's being spent. I mean, roughly $1 billion a year for TDOC. Our recidivism rates when someone comes out of a TDOC facility are actually much lower due to the programming you all provide than they are out of a local jail. We've known that for years. I mean, that's not something that is a mystery. And yet, when's the last time we actually built a state facility, either through reserve funds that y'all have built up or through just general fund revenue? When's the last prison we actually built?
That would be Bledsoe Correctional Complex, and that was around 2009, around in there.
And the one before that?
That would be Morgan County Correctional Complex with the expansion there. I can't remember the year on that. I'd have to look it up.
It's been a bit. Is
It
that fair
has.
enough?
Yes, sir.
So our population is outpacing our needs. And yet every year there are pretty significant reversions that are coming back into the general fund. I say all this to highlight this. At some juncture, I'd love to see, and I've brought this up before, some sort of a projection or plan on how we can make sure to house these prisoners in a way that we utilize the tools that you all have already to ensure lower recidivism rates. Because if we know they're going to be doing better in a state facility, we know that we have the funds available to be able to do that, why aren't we doing it? Because it's been a significant amount of time since we've actually increased y'all's capacity. So we continue to kind of go around that, and we change every single year how we look at it. But everybody else, be it, any other entity of state government, we look at the general fund and we look at general fund revenue on needs specifically for capital expenditures. But for some reason or another, we don't seem to do that with you all. And I've never really understood that. So that's not a question necessarily for an answer right here today. But at some point, I'd like to see a long-term plan on how we're going to properly manage the population that is being housed as convicted felons that are TDOC prisoners, so that it doesn't have this multitude of like kind of different funds that are out there. But what's the true vision for how to make sure these folks get the care they need, the treatment they need, the housing they need, so that they don't come back again? Fair enough? Thank y'all very much for everything you do. I really appreciate the work you do to keep us safe.
I have no further questioners on my list. Again, we do appreciate, as Leader has said, and a number of other people, the work that you all do, and the folks that worked very hard during very trying conditions to keep us safe and to keep the prisoners that are within your jurisdiction safe. So we thank you for that, and look forward to getting the information that's been requested here today back to my office, and we will distribute it to the committee. But thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
There's always been a couple.
All right, we are next on our list is the Board of Parole, and we know that the esteemed Parole Board Chair, Mr. Montgomery, is unable to be with us today, but he has sent mercy 5 people to replace him. We thank you for being here, and I believe, Mr. Reviance, that you're going to take the lead on the presentation. So please feel free to get underway.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to the committee for inviting us up today to speak about our agency. Yes, Parole Board Chairman Richard Montgomery is not with us today. He had a pressing matter that required him to stay in his office today, and he just could not get down here in time. So he does send his regrets that he's not here. And as you can tell, when we don't have a chairman with us, we have to bring a full team. If I can, I'd like to introduce who is with me today. To my left is our General Counsel, Rob Clark. To our right is Parole Administrator Cindy Taylor, who's over some of the divisions she's over includes our budget. To her right is Parole Administrator Amber Library, who is over our hearings division. Of course, you all know Ryan Baird, our legislative liaison, and behind me in the crowd is our communications director, Dustin Krugel. Just to be brief, I know, Madam Chair, the other day you asked us to be very brief, so I shall honor your request. I believe on you all's dashboards, you all should have our presentation. First four slides tells you a little bit about who we are. Would encourage you all to look over that as you have time. If you have any questions today, please ask, or afterwards when you return to your office, please reach out to us, or you can certainly catch Ryan. Some highlights I would like to touch on real quick is through the COVID pandemic, we remained operational. We never shut down. We were able to change our business model. We were able to continue to hold hearings. Thanks to the executive orders from the governor, we were able to conduct what was normally face-to-face hearings. We were able to conduct those via the telephone. I'm very proud of Ms. Lineberry's staff and the changes that they made so we could stay operational. Proud to say too that we have returned to in-person hearings. So we're now back face-to-face in our administrative meetings and our clemency hearings. We're now back to face-to-face, and the public is able to interact with us much easier now by being directly across from us versus on the telephone or over video. If we can jump straight to slide number 5, which is our budget overview. Fiscal year 21-22 budget was $8,796,700. We did a few months ago, we requested a supplemental of $86,443. What that money was for, our administrator fell ill and had to retire suddenly. Had over 30 years with the state, had a lot of vacation built up. That's a mission critical position that Chairman Montgomery and the rest of the board felt imperative that we had to fill. So we reached out to our colleagues at FNA and they were gracious enough to help us with that. Our 22-23 requested budget is $9,381,400. Our improvement requests were $5,067,100. We were very excited to see the governor's budget included everything we had asked for, with the exception for one item. First item we had requested was STS Disaster Recovery Service from our friends at STS. They house all of our data for our parole hearing system, our paperless system, and to ensure we could come back up in a timely manner in the event there was a catastrophic data issue with either Data Center North or South. We have purchased this protection. We also asked for our hearing officer and board travel and training. Back when we made the emergency budget cuts, we gave up all of our training dollars and we cut our travel budget as well. The reason we did that is so we could keep persons employed. The only way we could reach our magic number was to let people go. And our chairman was not prepared to do that. We're a small agency of 81 employees. We just don't have a lot of areas that we can cut. Our request was $119,900, and that is included in the governor's budget. We're also looking forward to getting our staff back into training. We like once a year to bring our hearing officers together. Our hearing officers are truly scattered to the 4 corners of the state. We love to get them together for 3 days a year, face to face, train them. Our colleagues from correction and other agencies come in and train with us. It's a good opportunity for everyone to learn from one another. And also in the training, we're going to be able to send some of our staff to the NAFI Institute to participate in the TGEI, MI, Lead Tennessee, and the CPM program. A lot of our staff is getting to the point where we can retire if we choose to, and we want to make sure that we have the next generation trained and ready to go to take over for us. Last item that was funded in the governor's budget is a clemency position in total of $59,900. We've seen a drastic increase in clemency applications with this administration. We were looking today after a conversation with one of you all. We have processed 1,417 applications through this administration. In the past, the clemency duties were, I don't want to say a part-time duty that our board operations did, but it wasn't a daily duty. That has now become a daily duty, and we need help. The item that was not funded was career path salary increases for our hearing officer staff and our sentence docketing techs. We are working very closely with DOHR to remedy that, and Chairman Montgomery and I feel like we have a good plan in place for DOHR to help our staff. Last slide, I will go over slide 9, our reduction plan. Thankfully, it was not called for in the governor's budget. It's $89,000. To reach that number, we would have to, unfortunately, let go 2 full-time positions. With that, I would ask that you all consider the governor's budget and be happy to answer any questions you may have.
For the record, Director, the career path salary increases that were not funded, what was that amount?
Madam Chair Lady, $289,700.
Thank you. All right, Representative Miller, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. It's more of a request, I guess, than a question, but can the board provide details on how they have seen the parole process change since its enactment?
Of the successful reentry?
Yes.
Be happy to do that. If I may, I can answer one great thing that's come out of this Successful Reentry Act, if I may.
Yes.
You all, in a small piece, well, not a small piece, in a piece of the Successful Reentry Act, you all permitted video impact statements that victims can send to the board. You all funded a position for that. We have filled that position. The employee is working. And also, you all had earmarked some money to build for STS to build a program to handle these videos. Well, our staff in cooperation with STS was able to take a technology that is already out there, utilize it, and the only cost to the state was labor, man hours by state staff to build the system. It's something we're very excited about. We have National Crime Victims' Rights Week coming up the third week of April. We're going to start advertising that service. It's very good service for persons who don't want to come and testify at parole hearings. And it's also a good service for our elderly victims who may not be with us when it comes time for a parole hearing.
Representative Miller, did you have a follow-up?
Have clemency recommendations been increasing over the past few years? And if so, do you think this will continue?
I don't have the numbers on how many clemency applications have been approved. I can tell you, I've been with the board since 2011. In my history but I have not been in this position since 2011. But since I have been with the board, we have never conducted as many clemency hearings as we are now. I'm sorry, Representative, Ms. Taylor just handed me the numbers. We've conducted 75 clemency hearings during this administration.
Okay.
And are most of those hearings, are they based on new evidence, or what's the basis for those clemency hearings primarily?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Rob Clark. I'm General Counsel for the Board of Parole. Those are hearings that are initiated by the applicants. Each governor, they get to write their own clemency applications. They get to set the criteria. So the clemency applicants initiate the process. Once they apply and they've met the threshold criteria of the governor, those are sent out to board members to write them up and make a recommendation as to whether or not the board should hold a hearing. So of the 1,000+ applications that we get, those are filtered down through the governor's criteria. Some people might send in an application, not provide all the materials they're supposed to provide. Say, for instance, in a pardon application, you have to be 5 years after expiration of your conviction. So sometimes we'll have people apply in that period before they've hit that 5 years. Commutation, sometimes people won't fall within all of the criteria. But those are initiated by the applicant, and then the board whittles them down to the ones that, based on the instruction and criteria from the governor, they feel would be worth the board's time to conduct a full and fair hearing in order to make a recommendation to the governor on the application, once they've hit those initial criteria that he's outlined.
All right. Thank you. Chairman Baum.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My understanding is there's a couple of outstanding lawsuits, and I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about the status of these claims.
Chairman, I will tell you what I can. Naturally, we cannot go into details. The AG's office strictly prohibits us from doing that for obvious reasons. I can tell you all, since you have received this presentation, one case has been dismissed by the court. The second case pending against us, we are a very minor litigant, is I believe the proper term in this case. There is a local municipality that is named as the main, and then Department of Correction and us. We
Yes.
we have very small exposure.
And Chairman Baum, Rob Clark, General Counsel for the board, if I may say, if I may separate between the number of lawsuits that we have pending, those are the ones that would have damages associated with it, financial damages at the end that would end up in front of the Claims Commission. And as our Executive Director, Mr. Provine, said, there's one of those remaining. And we are a pretty minor player in that case, but obviously it has to play out in the system. Otherwise, we do have other lawsuits pending against us, but those are not for monetary damages.
Okay, thank you for that. And maybe just one follow-up. Would the monetary damages, would they be from like lost earnings, or would it be more from other expenses? Or maybe you can't say.
Without going into too much detail, Mr. Chairman, I believe the claimant is seeking that for wrongful imprisonment.
Okay, just
the legal theory under which they're seeking compensation.
just punitive damages.
I believe they're trying to claim an actual monetary loss.
Okay, thank you for that.
Well, thank you. We don't have any further questions on our list, and we will be happy to tell Chair Montgomery that you all were in and out in less than your allotted time, because I think we cheated you a little bit on the front end. You did a remarkable job, even though it did take 5 of you to replace him. So, but thanks again for being here with us today.
Thank you,
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee.
Next up, we have our friends from Tricor. The Chief Executive Officer, I think everyone knows. And if you would introduce yourselves, and we will just get right into the presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. Honored to be here today to present Tricor's budget to you for FY 2023. To my right, I have my Chief Transition Officer and General Counsel, Demetria Gibson. And to my left, I have my Chief Financial Officer, Pat Thompson. Just a brief agency overview. Tricor is a self-sufficient agency. We're governed by a 9-member board of directors, and I'm happy to say that we've actually got our 9th member appointed by the governor this week. So we are at full board strength for the first time in over a year and a half. We're based in 12 locations, which is the 10 state correctional facilities, 1 outside facility, and we are in 1 county jail system, which is Shelby County. We provide work skills, pro-social programming, and cognitive behavior restructuring for those members that aren't real familiar with Tricor. And we also provide pre- and post-release transition services. Our operations that we have across the state include agriculture, which is mainly row crops and beef cattle. We have service businesses, which are call centers, private industry enhancement programs with private partners. We have recycling, document imaging, just to name a few. We also have a vocational trades program in Memphis as well. Manufacturing, we do license plates, textiles, print, industrial cleaning products, and our Braille program over at Riverbend Maximum Security. We do run a dashboard that we pay particular attention to, and our 3-year recidivism rate for last year was 21.8, which was a little above what we normally run, and it was mainly due from one facility that had a lot of releases with substance abuse type issues. We realized that we didn't have the network of support for those individuals whenever they got out, and we've corrected that issue since then. Our recidivism rate for this current year, we're trending right at 10%. So we're seeing a marked improvement in that. Our revenue for FY 2021 was $20.65 million. We served over 1,300 offenders, and we programmed a little over 1.15 million hours. And we provided all these programs at zero cost to the state of Tennessee and the taxpayers. One of the things I'd like to talk about is just our last year's fiscal comptroller's audit. We had 4 findings, which was up from our previous audit, and one of those was a repeat finding that I'd like to just mention briefly. And it's where we need to improve our procedures for preparing and reviewing financial statements to prevent errors. One of the problems that we have with a year-on-year audit is that we don't have a lot of time sometimes to correct all of the different issues that a finding may generate. We've corrected a lot of those from the prior year's audit in last year, and we will continue to work on that, and we expect to not have a repeat of finding on that one going into the audit that we're currently here, which is on 2021's financials. All the other 3 findings that we had, the findings were mitigated with action plans, and we expect no other issues around that. Our budget for this upcoming year in 23 is $28.5 million. That's down a little bit from the year before, but it's just all due to the reissue of the new license plate. Most of the plates will be produced in 2022, which is this fiscal year, and then the balance of those plates will be done in 2023. Our capital budget is $950,000 that we have slated for replacement of necessary equipment as well as additional equipment for different businesses. And we're not requesting any funding for next year. So with that, Madam Chair, that concludes my presentation. I'm open to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Well, thank you for a succinct presentation. I think people have gotten the word, and we do appreciate that. Again, a lot of information that you provided ahead of time for the committee and questions answered, but we do have some additional ones, I believe, beginning with Chairman Williams.
Thank you, Chair Lady. Thank you for coming today. I think I remember last year you talked about because of COVID that you were expecting a reduction of about $2.5 million in revenue and that you were trying to offset that. I guess the question, are you expecting that to continue this year? And how do you expect or hope to mitigate that shortfall?
We're expecting not to hit our budget, but not by those numbers. We're expecting to be within $1 million of our targeted budget. And a lot of that is due to more of the correctional officer situation in the prisons. But there's another key piece, and that is with our private partners. They're experiencing tremendous losses in supply chains.
Oh.
So, we're kind of caught into two different things. The good news for us is that the COVID-19 situation is far less this year than what it was last year. So we're focused mainly on those two fronts.
All right. Thank you very much.
Representative Shaw.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you for being here. I'm always a fan for TRICO. I think that program really does a lot for us, and I'm very appreciative. Did want to ask you, though, I know you were authorized back in 2020 to expand the program to provide more work for the local jails. Can you give the committee an update on this expansion?
Yes, sir. Representative Shaw, we are in one county, full-blown program, and that's in Shelby County Corrections. We have a recycling program there, and we have a little over 80 offenders that are working in that program currently. We were in Henderson County where we were just doing programming. We didn't have a work program associated with it. One of the things that we were doing with Henderson County was training their personnel to be able to take over the programming, once they were fully trained. We did that within about a year, and just January, this past month, we have ended that part, and they're programming themselves now. Of course, they reach out to us if they need any help.
I have
Representative Shaw.
just for clarification, now, will your program continue? Will this program continue, and could you just kind of
Yeah.
briefly talk about what area?
Yes, sir. We're focused on a lot of different counties right now to where we are talking with several different ones on different types of programs and projects. One of the things that we want to make sure of is that we put the right partners and the right program in place to where it's successful. Really, Shelby County is the first. It's really the pilot program for us. We've had nothing but great success with that, and the administration at Shelby County has been great to work with. And we've got probably 5, maybe 6 other counties that we're currently in discussions with, trying to expand that county program.
And just along those lines, the work that's being done within the prisons, within the counties, giving prisoners work experience, giving them an opportunity to earn money. Do we have any numbers on how that impacts, if it does impact their ability in the job placement once they're released?
I'll turn that question over to Demetria Gibson, who's our Chief Transition Officer.
Hello, Demetria Gibson, Chief Transition Officer in charge of the programming that we do provide. So one of the things that we notice is that it makes a tremendous difference when an individual has had the ability to experience what work looks like. And so for that reason, our folks end up being some of the best employees that you can find once they are released because they're used to it. We treat all of our programming as if it's a real job. So they come in, they do interviews with our team, they have annual twice annual evaluations. They go through an orientation, and we really do treat it as if it is a work program. One of the other highlights that we do to make it be successful and to try to add as much support as we can to our folks is that we have a mandatory savings program, which all of our participants who are eligible for release have, and that's required across the board as part of our program. So once they're released into the community on the very first day, they have their savings that they've earned themselves already with them, and they're able to be successful and buy those work boots or pay for childcare when they go back into the community. And that removes a lot of barriers that they have. So they're definitely really successful in that. One final point that I'll add, as we are vetting different partners and different opportunities, one of the things that we look at is the Department of Labor's projections in terms of what the workforce will need in the next 5 to 10 years. And we try to marry our programming up to what the needs are going to be in the labor market so that they will be successful when they are released.
And how do you all interact with organizations like Project Return, which just opened operations in Hamilton County a few months ago? And I'm sure there are others.
So
across the
we consider
state.
them to be very critical partners. We partner with them because they do provide a lot of work programming for our folks. They have their own employment program that they provide. We partner with a number of other nonprofits. Dismiss House is one of them. It's located right here in Nashville. They do a great job of providing wraparound services for our folks. CEO Hart had mentioned that we had a group of individuals that were released from Bledsoe County that had a pretty significant substance abuse issues. And so what we did was to try to steer as many of those individuals to Dismiss House so that they could get those wraparound services and have those substance abuse issues addressed. And we've seen tremendous success with that.
Thank you. Again, we, in previous conversations with the Department of Corrections, recidivism continues to be a huge issue. It's a cost to society. It's a cost to the taxpayer. And we appreciate anything that can be done to reduce that number. The Leader Lamberth, you're next on my list.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And to echo those points, thank you all for everything that you all do. It really is impressive. I mean, from license plates to a variety of other services that you provide to the state, but also just to make sure that these prisoners have an opportunity to do a real job and a real wage and to have something that they can count on once they're released. So with that in mind, last year Tricor stated it had a proposed capital budget of about $1.6 million to put towards new business startups and purchasing agricultural equipment. We had heard about that in a hearing at that juncture. So this year, I know the proposed capital budget is about $950,000. Can you give us an update on how that's going on the business startups, and specifically if any of the capital budget items from last year are kind of rolled over into this year?
I'll turn that over to Pat in just a second, and he can give you a lot more detail on that. But our capital budget really fluctuates from year to year, depending upon what we see as replacement needs for existing equipment. For example, in agriculture, if we have to do a replacement of a combine, it's $500,000 now, so it has a significant impact. The one thing I will say is over the last 2 or 3 years, we've invested a significant amount of dollars in the license plate factory, actually twice. We got recovery from the first one that got blown away, but the second one, just the printing system itself was a little over $1.6 million. So whenever we're looking at new business startups or replacement equipment, those are the kind of things that really drive our capital investment needs. But to answer it specifically, I'll turn it over to Pat Thompson and let him give you some more detail.
Am I on?
No.
Am I on?
No.
Testing.
There you go.
Got it. Okay. Pat Thompson, Chief Financial Officer for Tricor. With regard to the rollover of FY22 capital budget to FY23, a number of those items did roll over. As David mentioned, some of our priorities changed throughout the year last year. Those items that we required to meet current needs were bumped to the top of the list in place of some items that were on the regular replacement calendar. Those items were evaluated to see if they could withstand another 12 months and roll to the next budget. Some of those items that are hitting this year in the FY23 proposal have to do with sewing machine replacement in our textile operations, which is it's something that needs to kind of be visible to the committee with regard to a budget every year. Some of those things are getting lots of hours on them, and they can go at any time once they start to reach the end of their service life. In addition, when you've got critical press machines, printing equipment like that, which is very expensive, if we do have an issue with one of those things, their replacement sometimes comes up quickly. We have to make decisions between repair versus replace. Of course, the best thing for the offenders are to be working on the most recent equipment. When they come out, they'll have the relevant skills to operate that equipment when they come out, and it should enhance their ability to get a job when they come out. A couple of items I noticed from our farm. We've kept an item out there for irrigation pivot, pretty expensive piece, $120,000. It's been out there a couple of years now. The right time has not presented itself, and a lot of that had to do with the recovery from the tornado a couple of years ago. And we are beginning at this part, we're starting to, we have been actually expanding a beef herd over at Bledsoe County, and we're planning for some building expansion there for a calf barn and things like that. As I think we've exceeded 700 units or something in the herd now. We should be experiencing a lot of calves dropping at the calving season, and that's given us a little bit of pressure to put them under roof to take care of them. So it also gives the vets some place to work. So those are some things that generally move along with the budget, and as funds allowed, we've been able to invest in those. Last couple of years, as you noted, we were unable to meet the projected revenue. We take that into account as well, and we push items to the next budget year if we're low on cash, or cash is in a downward trend. The good news is Tricor is back trending upward. So our cash reserves that we have to build ourselves are recovering nicely. So we're starting to see a little light at the end of the tunnel in some of these replacement cycles.
Perfect. Thank you so very much. And I'll say, just I guess as a PSA here on this, you guys have nothing to do with the design of any particular play, just the production. So if there are not any issues there potentially, it definitely isn't on y'all. Y'all just make sure to get them produced and out the door on time. So thank y'all for that. And just thanks for everything you do. It's really neat what you provide to the system. And I say this every year, but I really appreciate it because we need more of that. We need more programs like what you guys do and to expand JAWS, because it really does change lives. And it gives folks just a lot of pride, and you guys see it every day, in learning how to put in a good, hard day's work and to see the benefits of that over time. So thank y'all.
Thank you, Leader Lambert.
Representative Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you all for the great work you do. Two questions. Tricor programs are provided zero cost to the state. Has it always been that way?
Yes, except at the initial startup whenever Tricor was created in 1994. For the first, I think, 3 years, state appropriations were given to Tricor to get it started and to start building a reserve. But since that time, we've operated without any appropriations.
And currently, your revenue, 20 million plus, how is that generated again?
Through the sale of products and services, for one, and to state agencies mainly. Department of Correction is our largest state agency. Of course, we do license plates for the Department of Revenue, and then we do some other services for some state agencies, but not at the levels that we do for those two. And then the other part is through private partnerships with Tennessee companies and other companies on the outside. We have 2 wood flooring operations that are privately held, and we've got a medical sewing operation that we do that it's a private partner. And then we have call centers across middle and western Tennessee that we operate.
Madam Chair, 2 more questions, if I may, quickly.
Representative Miller, go ahead.
Recidivism at 21 is, I don't know how to measure what to compare that, but is that good?
Not for us. 21.8 has been the high since I've been CEO. Typically, we're in around 15 or 16%. And as we talked about, it was one area where we had a lot of substance abuse people being released, and we just didn't have the network, in place to help them the way that we needed to is what we think, so.
And Representative, if I may, just for clarity, so if we have a 21.8% recidivism rate, that means about 89% of our folks did not, I'm sorry, 79% of our folks did not come back. And as David said, we typically are within the 15% rate, meaning 85% of our folks remain in the community after 3 years.
So with additional resources from a standpoint of a financial investment, I like to look at as an investment from the state, would that help or not help, or would it make a difference?
I don't think that at this point it makes a difference.
Representative Ogles.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for being here today. I appreciate the great work y'all do. You spoke briefly about the mandatory savings for participants in your program. Do you by chance track any data that relates to the victim restitution? And do you have any numbers that you can share with that? I'm just hunting some data on our victim restitution rates.
Over the
Thank you.
last 5 years, no, it's 10 years, I'm sorry, 10 years at Tricor, offenders have paid in right at $2.4 to $2.5 million in victims restitution. So it averages around $250,000 a year that they pay back in.
All right, well, that has exhausted our question list. Again, thank you for joining us today. And it is critically important that what you all do, and I think the point has been made, but we'll underscore that your work is done without state funding, but it has a tremendous impact on state funds because all of those, whether it's 79 or 85, all of those people who don't go back into the system, they're not only are they not a drain on the taxpayer, but they're out there working and contributing. So it really is important that you continue your good work, and we appreciate it. And I think that the challenge for us is to figure out how to scale it up or to find more partners, find more ways to help other folks do the same kind of thing that you all do. So thanks again for all that you do for the state of Tennessee without our funding.
Thank you, Madam Chair. and Thank you, committee.
Without objection, we are back in session. And just a reminder, we will be meeting on Thursday afternoon for budget hearings one more time. Chairman Zachary tried to have an accident last week to get him out of doing it again, but luckily for he and us, he was not injured and is able to maintain his presence here. And then we look forward to seeing him on Thursday along with the rest of you. And then next week we will have a different schedule. So with no other business coming before the committee, we stand adjourned.
I was willing to get hit by a semi.